Hello everyone. So today I am going to tell you a little bit about my experience here with my case study for TSL 506. My case study student was named Begum and she is from Turkey. I met her through one of my other previous classes and I always thought that she was a very intelligent and dedicated, motivated student, so I thought that perhaps she would like to work with me to get some additional practice and work on some reading and writing strategies together, and so that's what we did. The first part of the case study is about the questions. So I created these 9 questions to ask Begum at the beginning of this course study. So, of course, I already knew about Begum here and there, but I really wanted to ask her these specific questions so that I could get a little bit more insight on her learning process, how does she feel, where is she at, and how has her background and her motivations affected her. One question that I thought was really interesting was about what is it like learning English in the U.S. versus in your home country, and something that she told me was that in her home country it's very common that they learn British English, and I used to teach English in Russia, and that was my first English teaching job actually. And when I was teaching there, we used Oxford materials, and it was the British version of all these books. So it didn't surprise me, but it's kind of a change of pace for me because now I'm teaching in the United States and I taught in Colombia, and all of that is very U.S. based. So she said that her preference is that she learns U.S. English, and of course, my student is very motivated and focused on taking the TOEFL exam, and so because of that she's more interested in the U.S. English. She's really happy to live in the United States. She's learning English because her family lives in the United States now, and her sister has married a citizen that only speaks English, not Turkish, and they have a child, and so that is really important to her that she's able to talk to that child in her native English. And so she's got really high levels of motivation. She also wants to get her dental license in the United States, so there's lots of things going for her. When we talk about difficulties in learning English, opportunity to practice English, Begum did tell me that for her, speaking isn't the most difficult part, it's listening, because it's more challenging when you're hearing a word for the first time and you've never heard it before. When she's speaking, she has more opportunity to kind of change her word around if she can't figure it out exactly what she wanted to say, but for listening it's more difficult. She did tell me, though, that she has pursued outside materials such as TV shows and studying for the dental board exam, that she's been able to enhance her skills. And also she told me that, she creates all the opportunities. It's ultimately up to her to have enough opportunities. Of course, her family is Turkish and her parents don't speak English. So that is an easy excuse if she were to say, oh, but I have to speak Turkish because of my family. But what I really thought was interesting is that Begum had a lot of accountability in saying that I need to create the opportunities. It's my responsibility, no matter what, to find opportunities to speak English. So I thought that was really important what she had said. Okay, so for the error analysis, overall she had a very easy response, flowing, easy time responding to me. There were no errors that really impeded her meaning. I wasn't ever confused about what she was saying. There were a couple errors that she did make, and I chose not to I didn't want to correct her during the interview. I wanted to let her go ahead and speak and speak and speak, and just not give her any feedback during the interview or correct her there. I wanted her to have the natural flow and negotiate the meaning on her own. Paraguay and Boyle does say that there's no proven recipe for feedback and error correction, so that's what I decided to do in this particular case. Some of the things I observed with Begum is that making the distinction, so some word choice, fun or funny. Also with verb expressions and collocations, give attention or pay attention. So those are some common things that I've seen repeated. I saw specifically in this interview, but I saw repeatedly. I've seen that in her in the past. Gerund forms, so virtually no gerund forms. Always base forms, so that's something that she can work on or we can work on. And then the vowel sounds and W sounds also can be improved. Some ways that could improve and mentioned in Paraguay and Boyle are listen to podcasts, and what I really liked about their idea is to even create some podcasts. So find topics that are very interesting or that the student wants to talk about and then create a podcast, which I really like. Also watching series or using series, Begum does already do that, so that's a good thing. And then also the other example that they gave, one looks, one doesn't. So this is one interesting activity that you'd need a partner to work with in explaining and drawing and finding out what the final outcome would be. So I think all of those activities would be a great way for Begum to improve. In terms of oral language proficiency, I gave her a rating according to SOLOM. We also had for adults ACTFL. Something that I found was the categorization of her oral proficiency across all of them were a little bit odd because they weren't exactly the same. But I thought that based on the SOLOM matrix and the ACTFL, that an intermediate fluency range would be the best category for her. There were some, L1 influence there on certain things like word order. She is able to navigate changes in communication and topics, and she's precise, and it's clear that she has a voice, and that also came through in her writing. But she still needs to refine some of her vocabulary and optimize some of her syntax and minimize L1 influence on her word order. One thing that I really, really agree with, and something that Begum discussed in her interview, is that mentioned from Ellis. The opportunity to interact in the L2 is central to developing L2 proficiency, and I thought that was really a great point because that's exactly what Begum herself had said, and she is responsible for creating that opportunity, so I really like that connection that arose. Okay, in terms of part 4, written language proficiency, Begum told me one time that she doesn't like writing. It is her most difficult section on the TOEFL exam, and I think that perhaps it just comes from a lack of practice and a lack of guidance. But in any case, we did work on some of this stuff for the TOEFL, especially because she told me that she had a hard time getting her ideas prepared and that she usually just writes whatever for the amount of time that she has for the prompt. So I worked with her on doing some pre-writing brainstorms, and then we did some exercises on cohesion, so using different transition words and making a cohesive paragraph. And then we also worked on some concise, some exercises for that. The main thing that I did with her is that we went through a short keyword organizer where we divided that organizer into 4 points. So you can see on this graphic there are four paragraphs in the TOEFL independent task: introduction, body 1, body 2, and then conclusion. So I just categorized these into 4 different areas: B1, B2, B3, and B4. So these short TOEFL organizers are used for speaking as well. And so based on the prompt, she would say whether or not she agrees or disagrees. And then in B2, she would put 3 words to describe her main idea or what she's going to discuss in that paragraph. Same thing for B3, and then same thing for B4, conclusion, which is a restatement of the main idea and her main points. TOEFL writing has a very specific organizational structure, and so when we work on the cohesion and we have a very logical organization, which is topic, sentence, reason 1, detail, reason 2, detail, and that's it. So the organization can be easily shared, but Begum really needs to work more on conventions and some sentence fluency because she has a lot of L1 influence on syntax, which has disrupted her ideas in a big way. She has a clear voice, clear ideas, clear content, and great organization, but she really needs to work more on her flow in terms of syntax. As for the lesson went really well. I thought that, everything was planned out in a strategic way that allowed us to go through step by step. It allowed us an ample opportunity to discuss and use those questioning strategies that I'm so fond of. And it also allowed Begum to use the language to find out about cause and effect relationships, and she was able to create those I wonder statements, which is exactly what I took from making sense, and that was the main strategy that I focused on. And you can see these photos here are just some of the different steps. I did building background knowledge with a know, want to know, and learn chart. We also did some vocabulary search in context. Then I had Begum go through and read paragraph by paragraph, and we did some I wonder statements and worked on using those I wonder statements to implement active reading strategies and search for those answers. We discussed those step by step. Then we identified cause and effect relationships in the text using reference, which is a review of a past skill that we worked on. And finally, we wrapped it up with some TOEFL practice set questions, and we also did the learn part on that KWL sheet. So it was a really well-flowing lesson, and I think that it was quite successful, but I feel like I need to find ways to implement more vocabulary development explicitly in a lesson like this, because it was just, everything was based on context. And as you can see in question 6, those are the only types of vocab questions that are on the TOEFL exam. But even still, I would have loved to have more to my vocab presentation and more repetition for those words. All right, so over the course of these weeks with Begum, I really have a high level of respect for her. She is incredibly intelligent. She's highly motivated. I truly believe that if you want to learn a language, you must have a high level of intrinsic motivation, and she clearly does. Her outside circumstances with her family also have helped her with that motivation. Ultimately, my biggest takeaway is that she needs to work on conventions in writing, and that will also help her with her flow of speech and perhaps even in understanding text more rapidly, because in TOEFL readings and more academic stuff, they get quite complex with the word structures and the order. So when she works on that and is able to produce that, recognizing it also will work hand in hand. She is able to contemplate and absorb complex ideas in reading, and it's really inspiring. 2 of my biggest takeaways from the course I just wanted to share with you guys because they were great things that I found from 2 articles that I did in my annotated reference list. So one of them is using questions for developing content ideas, and you can see that in figure 1, this one on the right in this photo. So in this article, it shows a bunch of different strategies, 3 main strategies, but with explicit examples on how to develop these different types of questions in class. And I think it is just such an excellent way to prompt students to be critical thinkers, to work on their own, to encourage autonomy. And all of those things will eventually lead to communicative tasks if students are motivated to do that kind of work on their own. Perhaps then they'll want to share those ideas and they can be implemented in the classroom as well. And even if they aren't integrated into communicative tasks, they're more independent readers on their own and can gather this critical knowledge without guidance. And then the second one was using verbal protocol for formative assessment and reading. So this is basically gathering knowledge about what level or what difficulties your students are at, and what they're having in their reading comprehension.